whole thing really has all the hallmarks of a Hollywood film script, doesn't it?
It is a phenomenal terrorist plot.
The State of Islam will not die, but will return stronger than it was.
Terror plot in plan to bring down a passenger jet.
Can you believe that your brother's willing to sacrifice you?
I can't forgive. Forget them.
That was a level of creative execution that we have not seen.
The bit I still can't get my head around is how bomb parts can be mailed from Syria to a suburban Sydney address.
The device was broken down into pieces and put inside of a welder.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm joined today by producer Laura Sparks. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Now, most people, I think, would remember the terrible news that broke in 2017 of a terror plot that was thwarted. The plan was to blow up a passenger plane, an Etihad plane, leaving Sydney with hundreds of people on board. It didn't happen. Luckily.
Thankfully, yeah.
But we have spoken in this week's story for the very first time to some of the key players involved. And in a 60 Minutes exclusive, he was an ISIS Islamic State commander at the time.
Yes.
He's now on death row in an Iraqi jail. But he was one of the masterminds, Tarek Kayat. And we've never heard from him before.
No. And it's quite incredible footage, isn't it? He's wheeled in. Tarek Kayat was an ISIS commander, as you just said, and he got blown up in Raqqa in Syria.
Yes, he's in a wheelchair. It's very unusual to see these terror masterminds kind of in the flesh.
Yeah.
Especially as he's in this Baghdad jail on death row.
Sort of looks like an old man, doesn't he?
Yeah, very unimposing.
Yeah.
You can imagine the evil that he was plotting.
Yeah.
But he was planning this attempt on Australian soil. And it's a fascinating plot, so let's just run through it. I mean, he needed, first of all, people to carry it out here, and he happened to have his brothers here.
Two brothers who had been, well, at least one of them had been radicalised, as we know.
Yeah.
And that was Khaled Kayat. And it sounds like it was perfect for them, wasn't it? Because you could trust them, they're your brothers. And so that's how the plot began. We'll use these guys, we'll send bomb parts to Australia in a welder.
Yeah, it was surprisingly easy for them to do that. They packaged up parts of explosives, popped them in a DHL courier box and literally posted them around the world to test border security and to ascertain that they could, in fact, post a bomb to Australia.
Yeah, because, I mean, as our counter-terrorism expert explains, that you cannot, the people at the border can't look at every package that comes in. And if it was a welder. So, and they don't all go through security. So, yeah, it got through. The package got through.
It was a sophisticated plot, but also a simple plot. You had these two brothers. They live in Western Sydney. As you said, one of them was radicalised, but I think really importantly, they had not come to the attention of authorities here in any significant way. So they're what they call clean skins. They've got no record. They're not on a terror watch list. They're just immigrants in Western Sydney going about their lives. Kind of the perfect people to carry out these plans, except that they were very inexperienced.
Yeah, well, that's right. Exactly what you said. They were suburban men. They had never gone to Syria. They hadn't fought. They didn't understand terrorism. They certainly didn't understand how to put a bomb together.
No. But they had some very strict instructions and help coming via messenger services. Again, sophisticated but simple. It's that always that conflict in this story. They're getting text through encrypted messaging services on literally how to build a bomb in their back courtyard.
Yes, well, and these are family men. They're fathers. They've got children running around, and here they are in various places, including the courtyard, building a bomb, and then they decide to put it in a meat grinder.
So it's a very small bomb inside a meat grinder, which, as we found out filming this story, is actually a normal present to pack in your carry-on and take if you're headed to Lebanon or to the Middle East, a gift for family.
Yeah.
And that is where we should bring in our unsuspecting martyr, because he's such a key part of this story. And again, we have this exclusive with Amir Kayat. He's the younger brother. He had no idea any of this was going on, and he was the chosen martyr his brothers, Khaled and Mahmoud, decided they would put this bomb in this meat grinder in his bag. He's a fascinating character, isn't he?
Well, he is. And, I mean, we both feel sorry for Amir. He didn't know that it was happening. And now he has to live this truth that his brothers wanted to kill him. We're happy to sacrifice him. And that they were happy to sacrifice him because they didn't particularly like his lifestyle.
They didn't like him. They're devout Muslims. He's a bit of a party boy. I mean, he told us he likes the bars on Oxford Street.
That's right.
You know, he was
Yeah.
into drinking and whatnot, and that did not sit at all well with his devout family. So he basically was estranged from them. I mean, he hadn't seen them for years. And then one day in 2017, the brothers pop up and say, "Oh, how you going? How would you like a trip to Lebanon? You know, let's have a family reunion."
And for most people, at that point, you'd go, why are they offering me to go to Lebanon when I haven't seen them for 4 years?
Yeah.
But Amir didn't.
He didn't.
No.
And then, of course, on the day of the flight, the brother, Khaled, turns up with a meat grinder. I'm gonna put this gift in your bag and I'm going to drive you to the airport. At this point, I think in hindsight, Amir told us he was kind of like, what's going on here?
Yes, yeah. And I think it was when Khaled, the brother, said, I will pack the meat grinder. I'll
Yes.
put it in your carry-on. Now that, I think, did raise alarm bells.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I know if one of my siblings said to me, no, I'm going to pack your suitcase. We're like, no, you're not. And Amir described to us, he's a funny guy. You know, he's downstairs getting the house ready for his trip, and his brother Khaled is upstairs fussing with the suitcase and the carry-on and packing the meat grinder. They then drive to the airport, and we show in the story the CCTV, which, again, a lot of this hasn't been seen. It was some of it was tendered to the court. But it's kind of creepy watching it back now when you know what was planned.
When you know what was in that bag. I mean, I know bombs don't particularly tick anymore, but the clock was ticking.
Yeah.
The bomb was live.
Yep.
And Khaled held the bag
he
with
was
the bomb.
very insistent on carrying the cabin bag.
Yeah, it's quite fragile. He was careful with it. And then, of course, we see them get to the Etihad check-in counter.
So that's where this very sophisticated plan really comes undone. They check in, and Amir told us, which I thought was an interesting detail, was that his brother, very unexpectedly, very out of character, turned to him at check-in and gave him a huge hug and held him really close. And Amir said he was quite taken aback by that.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that the Etihad check-in staff agent said to him, I'm sorry, sir, your cabin bag, check through the main luggage, your cabin bag is a little bit overweight. You're going to have to remove something.
It's like, you didn't weigh the bag?
They didn't weigh the bag with the meat grinder. I mean, it's, it is kind of farcical. It's so serious, and the consequences would have been, but it's a bit of a comedy of errors.
Yeah.
And you, in our research for this story and in preparing to film, tracked down that Etihad worker.
Yeah. She was very hard to find. And it took a lot of messages for her to even call me. And I could hear her voice shaking even now, 8 years on, talking about it. And she basically said, you have to repack your bag. It's too heavy. And she said it happens all the time. And she said a lot of people don't do it. But, of course, they did.
And we see that in CCTV. We see Khaled grab the cabin bag. He takes something out, tucks it under his arm, and then he leaves. And Amir carries on, gets on the plane, none the wiser. Yeah. Meantime, this check-in assistant, unknowingly, I mean, she's kind of the hero.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I said to her. I said, you basically stopped the bomb. And when she found that out, that caused her a lot of grief. Like, she was suffering from post-traumatic stress about the whole thing. She couldn't sleep. She was kind of in fear of her own safety because she was dealing with a dangerous family, as it turned out. I think she would have liked to have spoken, but she still has that fear.
Scared of retribution and the repercussions. Yeah. Well, fair enough. So Amir gets on the plane and all of those lives are saved. And, of course, we know what happened after. There were huge, there was a tip-off, there were raids. The brothers here were arrested and they have lengthy jail sentences. But I found it fascinating talking to Amir about how he learned of his brother's plans, because he's still just, he went through Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
On to Beirut, meets up with his family. He's having a lovely holiday.
Yeah.
And he's got no idea until news breaks in Australia that these two brothers have been raided and arrested. And then he said to his family, like, oh my God, they tried to kill me.
Can you imagine finding out that your brothers have actually tried to blow you up and 400 other people up on a plane?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he too suffers still today, you know?
I do too, and I think he's a bit conflicted. I think it was a long interview with him. He's a talker, loves a chat, and a lovely man. But I felt there were times when he tapped into, you know, he said to me, I'm still angry. Of course I'm angry. But then remember, there were times when I said to him, you know, do you forgive your brothers? In the beginning, he was saying, I can't forgive. I just forget them. And then, you know, after talking for a while, he said he did forgive his younger brother because he believes he wasn't involved. We know from court documents, facts tended that he was. And that's another fascinating part of this story. I mean, the family dynamics in this plot.
I guess it's human nature to a certain degree to not want to think that your brothers were quite happy to blow you up on a plane. And I guess, you know, blood's thicker than water, but he's a sad, he makes me sad. I think, you know, I think he's still suffering.
Well, he suffered enormously because he was then arrested in Lebanon.
That's right.
And kept in jail for 3 years. The AFP were trying to convince Lebanese authorities that, look, we know this guy didn't have anything to do with it. And the Lebanese authorities took 3 years to acknowledge that and release him. He turned around and came straight home to Australia. He loves Australia.
Yeah. But there were no charges laid.
No charges.
So he's just
3 years
languishing
in a
this jail. Terrible jail.
Beirut jail. Yeah. But interestingly, I thought one of the first things he did when he got back to Sydney was he went to the sentencing hearing for his two brothers. So his two brothers that had made a bomb and planted it in his bag, planned to kill him. You know, they're found guilty. They're being sentenced, and he goes along to court to see them. And I thought what he said about that was really interesting. Yeah,
it was. I mean, he basically he spoke to Mahmoud, I think, the younger one, not Khaled, and Mahmoud said, "Please forgive me." Mahmoud actually asked for his forgiveness. So perhaps that's why he feels more. He thinks that Mahmoud is more innocent.
And I think he said he wanted to see them. He wanted to see them in the flesh and just kind of eyeball them as well. And they will be in jail for a long time, 45 and 35 years their sentences are in Goulburn jail. So they're not getting out anytime soon.
No, they'll be old men. Both of them.
But meantime, you know, Amir's very, very determined to clear his name. And I think that's why he finally agreed to speak on camera for the first time, isn't it? Because he wants everyone to know he wasn't innocent. And, I mean, what has this done to his life?
Well, that's right. I mean, that was one of the first things he said to me when I approached him. He said, I can't hold a job down, not because I'm not good at the job, but because within weeks people find out who I am, find out who my brothers are, find out that I was supposed to take a bomb on a plane, and I lose my job every time. I mean, that, you know, I felt really sorry for him, and I think you're right. I think that's why he decided to do the interview, because he wants everyone to know I did nothing wrong here.
Yeah.
I was the patsy. I didn't know. It wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. And that's clear, isn't it? It's clear
absolutely.
from the court case.
We know that is a fact, but it's very clear from talking to him. And he gives some really fascinating insights in the story, I think, into just the whole process leading up to the day and then after the flight as well.
Yeah.
What's quite chilling is, again, to the family dynamics, he says he doesn't believe his brother Tarek, who was the nicest commander, who we know was one of the masterminds, was involved in pulling the strings.
That's right.
So again, that sort of reluctance to dob in a brother or believe that his beloved brother would blow him up, which I guess, as you say, is probably a bit of human nature. But we know what Tarek's involvement was. And I think what I found quite chilling about this jailhouse interview was Tarek's talking about, you know, Islamic State's current resurgence, if you like. And he did give a really strong a warning, doesn't he?
That's right, that they're coming back. And we know that, don't we, from what is happening around the world. I mean, what happened in New Orleans on January 1 or over New Year's Eve into January 1.
Yep.
That was someone who was inspired by ISIS ideology.
Yeah,
right?
there's certainly been a wave of very visual ISIS or ISIS-inspired attacks and plots as well. Quite a few very serious terror plots inspired by ISIS that were foiled. Although, of course, they're the ones we don't often hear about unless they're really bad. Like there was a Taylor Swift concert in Austria last year that was targeted. I mean, that would have been thousands and thousands of young people blown to smithereens.
Horrifying if it had come off.
And the Etihad one as well, you know, it's hundreds of lives. So the big ones I think we hear about, that there are so many that the public just aren't aware of at all.
Yeah. Well, as the FBI former deputy director said, that they're the ones that it's the ones that you don't know about. It's the people that are being inspired by the ISIS propaganda that you don't know about that keep you awake at night.
Yes, and that are so hard to target. And to that point, I think, you know, ISIS was never really defeated. You know, the caliphate was declared dead and defeated, and we've won. And as the former acting director of the FBI told us, really they just moved. Yeah, they moved to North Africa. They've been very, very active. Yeah, perhaps less visual in the Western world, and also, you know, world leaders have had their eyes on other issues. There's been a lot of each country's had its own domestic terror issues. Certainly the States has. And there are global conflicts now that have perhaps taken eyeballs off certain terror threats. But the warning is from the FBI and from Tarek in jail that ISIS is still very active.
Yeah. And I mean, you uncovered some incredible propaganda that only came out at Christmas time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're putting it out all the time. And it's a weird thing to kind of Google on your work computer because it's really confronting. You know, it pops up and they've got people chopping people's heads off next to a Christmas tree, and it's very, very violent and very horrific. But it is just an absolutely relentless propaganda machine targeting people, as the FBI told us, who are perhaps disaffected, in whatever reason, in relationships, in life, have lost their job and looking for a cause, and then go down that path to radicalisation. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the concern is that they're still alive, and as Tarek told us in his jail interview, they're coming back. Not something anyone wants to hear, but it is a fascinating story. And if you missed it, you can catch up on our YouTube channel and, of course, on 9 Now. So thanks for joining us today on Extra Minutes.